aside a lot of the small symbolic bombings in cases where we don't have much information, and approach those that are more serious, those that involve fatalities, we're looking at 442 as a base. Of those that were unclaimed, we have only 61. Now, when is a bombing claimed and when is it unclaimed? It is often unclaimed when the choice of target makes the message obvious. So the bombing of a synagogue or the bombing of a mosque would carry an obvious message. Or it is unclaimed when the circumstances make it obvious. For example, if a drug trafficker in Colombia says that he is declaring war on the government of Colombia until they get off his back, and a series of car bombs go off in Bogota and Medellin, they don't have to call each time to tell you who's doing it. But of that remainder, the circumstances really don't lead to any pattern. In this particular case, it is not necessarily obvious in the choice of the target. To be sure, the World Trade Center is virtually a monument. It would be, in the eyes of some, a prestige target, like the Statue of Liberty, like the Stock Exchange, like the Empire State Building, all of which, in fact, have, at one time or another, been targets of terrorist bombings or terrorist threats. But beyond that, it is not obvious in the choice of target, nor have the perpetrators of this bombing explained their message, leading one to the conclusion that either there was something else, that this event was part of an unfolding drama, the end of which could not be seen from the beginning, that at some point in further incidents or in some type of a message, we would be informed as to the meaning of this. It would become clear to us with the passage of time. But we still do not know what that motive was, and the arrest of the individuals who are at least suspected of involvement may have disrupted.
Let me ask you, all three of you, or whoever wants to answer, one other question. Director Fox seemed to indicate that his hunch was that this was a group, a sophisticated professional group, known to him and others previously. How many such groups are there that would fit that type of category, that would be able to do this, that would be known, that would be professional? Is it 100? Is it 5? Is it something in between there?
Small number that operate here.
Small number.
Yeah. Well, if the question is if you put the requirement that they operate here or that they have operated here.
Yes.
If you say that the possibility that there is somebody that has operated elsewhere but hitherto has not operated on U.S. soil, then you expand your universe of candidates out to the dozen.
Well, let's start with the smaller universe. How many would that be? I'm not asking for an exact number. We're just trying to...
Well, I think there's no group in the United States that has in the past shown the capability to do this attack. There are a couple of groups that are not as active as they were, Puerto Rican separatists and so on, who have a long history of hitting targets in New York, but they've never done anything of this magnitude, nor are they very active today. Similarly, the narcotraficantes certainly have the capability. They have some network here in the United States, but they've shown no inclination to carry the war directly to us. So I'm one of those who think you have to look in other directions of the world.
Right. Do all of you, what is your view? I mean, we saw the charts that said, and both Commissioner Kelly and Director Sessions seemed to indicate that they did not foresee an increase in this type of activity. Thankfully, they didn't, well, hopefully they're right. Do you agree? Do the three of you agree with that?
No, I don't agree.
You do not. Go ahead.
No, my feeling is that the statistics upon which the charts were based really relate to known terrorist organizations that are and their behavior. there are some organizations that may well form that are of Mideastern origin that can operate here, that could perform the improbable.
Right.
The honest answer is whether terrorism will increase here or not calls for prophecy, and I'm not
Right.
recognizing the skills of prophecy. I would say purely on analytical grounds that predictions based purely upon extrapolations are always perilous, because one could look at extrapolations of, say, terrorist bombings in the United States in the 1970s and conclude that by the 1990s we would have thousands and thousands of terrorist bombings. Similarly, one can look at a chart which has seen a decline for a variety of historical reasons and domestic political reasons and conclude, therefore, the problem is over.
Yep.
I'm not in either place, and therefore I suppose my answer is dictated by prudence rather than prediction. And it is that since terrorism continues to be a serious worldwide phenomenon, and since Americans are the #1 targets, as Ambassador McNamara pointed out, that we would have to, at the very least, anticipate the possibility of events occurring in this country.
Right. Mr. Livingstone.
Well, I tend to be circumspect on this as well, but with one caveat, and that is that for so many years we have been regarded as an island of tranquility in a very dangerous world. And the rule of thumb that many of us used was that, as Ambassador McNamara said, it was always easier to cross a street than cross an ocean to carry out a terrorist attack. Why come here? Far from your lines of support, your infrastructure, and so on. If this, because this attack has occurred here, I think it is at least planted in the minds of some who in the past may have thought it too formidable an obstacle to come here. The fact that these folks have gotten away with it, at least to the point that they have detonated a bomb in a major New York landmark. And that story has been spread worldwide. And I think that has kind of an erosion factor, or will produce an erosion factor, where groups will no longer say, when they're trying to plan where to hit us, well, we won't do the United States, but they'll say, should we go to the United States? And I think that will have a negative impact in the long term.
Is there anything, I mean, it's just anything to, are we an increased target because there is no longer a bipolar world? Does somehow that let loose forces that were somehow contained? I've never heard anyone make the logical argument from A to Z, but instinctively it somehow seems probably correct.
I believe it is so. The years of the Cold War competition both submerged and, to a degree, controlled a lot of conflicts in the world. Now that that framework has been removed, we see the reemergence of two very...
Just increased conflicts in regional parts of the world.
Two very powerful motives throughout human history, and the one is religion, and the other is ethnicity. And if we look right across the globe now, whether it is the former Soviet Union, the Middle East, South Asia, Africa, we see a lot of these conflicts that have escalated, and these are not easily controlled or easily resolved, because we are now talking not simply about ideological competition, but real fundamental hatred.
Let me ask you one final question. I wish all three gentlemen would answer this. What differently would you do, given, if anything, given the changes that have been outlined today, given what has happened at the World Trade Center, on a policy basis? Here we have a subcommittee that has some jurisdiction over this. You have American people out there very concerned. Obviously, we don't want any overreaction. But there's also a danger of no reaction or underreaction. What specifically would you do, commenting either on some of the solutions that Jim Sensenbrenner and I proposed this morning, or others?
I think I would simply underline the two that I indicated at the outset. I think this is an opportunity to perhaps exert some greater control and security over explosives in this country. That's probably not a bad idea anyway. To be sure, those restrictions can be evaded to a certain extent with the use of homemade concoctions, but why make it easy for the perpetrators? Second, in my view, at least without touching immigration at all, I happen to be the grandson of immigrants on both sides. I'm married to an immigrant, and therefore would not like to see this become grounds for prejudice or limiting immigration. But this country has had for years...
I've been for opening up the borders and having more immigration. But, you know, the idea that limiting immigration is an idea of prejudice is, the two don't follow, and I think somehow we've heard some links about that here.
No, I don't think they follow. What I do think, it is not so a matter of who we can try to prevent to come in. I don't know how to try to prevent people from coming in. As Congressman Washington has indicated, we don't have a radar to tell us what's in people's minds. But when they come here and they carry out activities that are clearly can be judged as dangerous, or in some cases even have been convicted, and we have difficulty extraditing them, I think that is an area where we can say, look, you're welcome to come to the United States, but the rules are, leave the quarrels behind you.
Yeah, I just wanted to get in. Do you have another question, or you just want to follow?
Clarify
Go ahead.
Point. I'm sure you're making reference to something someone else said, but the problem I have with
I wasn't making any reference to any specific comment. I was just...
limiting access is not in and of itself, but as human beings who carry out policy, it's our history in the past that the prejudices that those people bring to work with them creep into the workplace, and they, in carrying out the best policy that the Congress could pass, end up bringing their prejudices with them. And it's a group association with people who happen to be from the Middle East that may, in this instance, the association from the incident, the allegations on the incident of the CIA shooting, the association here is when you start talking about limiting access to the United States, not you and I are the people who may vote for legislation that would do that with respect to people from Mexico and South America and the like, but it's the people who may think that there's some association, and they're keeping all of these people out is really the congressional intent that I worry about.
My final comment would be in terms of what usefully can be done. Legislation takes a long time to get through Congress in some cases. Even reports on hearings take a long time to get published. I would hope that in perhaps the summation that you as chairman can do, that you could go a long way toward explaining to the American people the realities of what can be done, what is unrealistic to expect, where there are successes, where there are things that need to be worked on. And by doing that, I think it would dispel some of the alarm that is automatically created when an event like this takes place. And that can come sooner than the committee report and ultimately the legislation.
Okay, either Dr. Kupperman or Mr. Livingstone, just...
Well, if I could, I've given you some specific suggestions in my prepared statement today and in my summary, but I sit before you as a very frustrated man. Brian and I have been in many forums. I remember none so well as in 1984 when Secretary of State Schultz pulled together a retreat for cabinet officers and those involved for one day in combating terrorism to say in an off-the-record format what is legally, politically, morally, and so on acceptable. And Brian and I were, I think, 2 of 3 outside people invited to be involved. Nothing has changed since that time except the body count has gone higher. There are victims, relatives of Pan Am 103 people in the audience here. What we've been doing isn't working. And I would submit to you that talking about